Hi, I'm Lucas Johnson.
And I'm Catherine Oakes.
And this is 2 Cents and Nonsense.
A place where we give our 2 cents on mortgage trends and money habits.
And share hot takes on hot topics. All right, episode 3. I'm excited because we have 2 topics that somewhat connect. The first one being about self-employment, and then the second one being reality TV, because all those stars are technically self-employed. I think they're all 1099. They're not W-2, and they're always trying to build their own brand. So
I thought you were going to say one is reality, one actually isn't.
Yeah, I guess that. But yeah, no, I think it's the fact that they connect via how they all have to file their tax returns Schedule C most of the time.
Well, we're teasing it too much.
There you go.
So let's just jump in.
That's fine with me.
Our 2 cents today is: can I buy a home if I'm self-employed? Am I impacted if I'm part of the gig economy?
Can you describe, because everybody has these terms and labels for all kinds of things, and I didn't know what it is, but what is the gig economy?
The gig economy is made up of persons who have made side hustles their full-time job.
So you're talking like if I was doing DoorDash, Airbnbs, Ubers, all that type of stuff, like multiple different 1099 type jobs. Mm-hmm. Okay, and then how could I buy a house if I'm doing that?
I think technically you could be considered part of the gig economy, even if you're just like a small business owner type thing. But I do believe it's meant more so to reference people who technically are not employing themselves in the sense that I'm Catherine Oakes LLC company, but in the sense that I am working on my own terms for
a company that doesn't give you W-2.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, anytime that if you're trying to buy a house and you're self-employed, we're looking at your tax returns mostly to see how much you've written off. And most simple businesses are just a Schedule C, and it's a pretty simple, straightforward formula where we're going to take what your profit is and then add a couple things back, mileage, appreciation, a couple different things. And then depending on what kind of business it is, one-time expenses, and then we're going to average that over 2 years to get your income, and then it runs the same way as any other business that's W-2. So,
and the Schedule C is the form that you would fill out on your tax returns.
Correct.
If you are your own business entity.
Correct.
You don't get a W-2.
No.
You don't get a 1099.
No.
The profits from your business are flowing directly into your bank account.
Yeah, and I know business structures can get pretty complex, which is why we won't really have time to kind of go into all the different ones, because sometimes you file it where you're filing business tax returns and you own parts of businesses, and what percentages of businesses do you own and how does that work? So, and then it can get very complex where we'd have to actually physically see all of the tax returns to make a determination. But for the most part, most basic single or sole proprietor businesses are going to end up being Schedule C, and they're pretty simplistic when it comes to trying to qualify. The unfortunate part is you do have to be doing it for 2 years so they can, for 2 years of tax returns is what we're going to look at. If you're over 5 years self-employed, then we can just look at the most latest tax return. But a lot of times you have to be, if you just start a self-employment business, it makes it very difficult to buy a house unless you've been doing it for at least 2 years, or you've shown income for 2 years for us to average out.
I think that's such an important point to make, because I do think people are drawn to the freedom of self-employment, and that's very exciting. And I love self-employed people. I want them to pursue whatever they feel like their calling is along being self-employed. Opening small businesses. We want to encourage that.
Entrepreneurship, I love it.
And
I
yet
love hearing that.
We don't want people to be surprised by this general rule of thumb of 2 years tax returns before being able to get pre-approved to buy a home.
Yeah, and I find that is a surprise to most people.
Yes.
And I do understand why it's a surprise, because they can be even, like, their business could take off for 1 year. And they're like, well, how can I? And it's like, well, unfortunately, these are the rules that are there. Or they'll be like, well, it's just smart to write off all my expenses. And I go, yeah, it is. But Uncle Sam is not going to let you get a loan unless you pay them their share.
Well, and probably good layman terms for that 2-year rule is any 1 year can be a one-off.
Yeah.
Like, you definitely have to consider 2020. For a lot of people, that was either a one-off in a terrible negative way or a one-off in a crazy, my business went through the roof sort of way.
Yeah.
So the 2-year rule does make logical sense that underwriters would want to look at a 2-year picture so they could average 2 years and go, well, there's not usually a 2-year anomaly, it's usually a 1-year anomaly. So if I'm looking at 2 years, I'm going to have an accurate picture.
Pretty much, exactly right.
So let's talk about 1099 employments for a minute,
Okay.
because I feel like that's a bit of a gray area. People can often think I'm not actually self-employed because my employer writes me checks.
Yes. But you are
But I get a
technically self-employed.
1099 at the end of the
Yeah.
year, not a W-2.
And you can write off your expenses. I'm a W-2, so I can't write off my expenses. So even though I'm paid commission, I don't get the opportunity to do that. Whereas as a 1099 employee, they're not taking your taxes out. So you do, and you can write off all of your expenses, and then you pay your taxes when you file. So that difference alone makes it to where you are self-employed.
Right.
In fact, instead of, you being a W-2 employee. Now, I have had people that have been contracted by companies, and then we tell them about the 2-year rule, and then they go to their employer and say, well, I want to be W-2. And as long as they change your structure, then that'll allow you to not have to wait the 2 years.
And it's always worth asking.
Yeah, if they say no, they
Yeah.
say no, and if they say yes, then you can buy a house pretty quickly.
Yeah.
So
For some mom and pop companies, the reason that they do pay their employees 1099s is because they don't have the appropriate infrastructure themselves as a business to pay out the necessary employer taxes
Yeah.
that would be required to pay employees W-2s.
yeah, it's less of a headache to the.
But in some situations, the employers are paying employees 1099 not related to those reasons. And so to go to your employer and say, hey, I've been paid 1099 for the past 3 years I've been employed with you. I don't really know, like, the reasoning doesn't quite make sense because I work a traditional 40 hours or something else like that, and I'm interested in buying a house soon. Can I just get switched to that structure of a W-2 employee?
Yeah, and I don't think employees realize the leverage that they have. If you're a good employee as an employer, you would much rather. For me personally, I'd much rather switch if I was in that position and I had a good employee, rather than having to hire somebody new, retrain them, do all those different things. I'd much rather just go, all right, we'll flip you over, and even if it costs me a little bit, and restructure than to lose a good employee. So I think some people don't realize the leverage that they do have over
It's one of those things you have not because you ask not.
Correct.
So it's
What's
worth
the worst
asking.
thing they do? They say no, and then you continue to do what you were doing before.
Exactly. So let's talk about tax deductions for a moment, because this would apply to both being a 1099 employee and also being like full on self-employed in the case that you file a Schedule C with your tax returns. The world out there, I feel like, has told this story that the pinnacle of being self-employed is that you have been able to write off all of your expenses to the point where you either have to pay little taxes at the end of the year, no taxes at the end of the year,
Or even get a refund.
Even get a refund. And although there's good reason for that, the reason for that is I have appropriately written off all of my expenses, which have canceled out. Let's be clear about how these deductions work.
Yeah.
Cancel out the income that I've made, that the IRS is not going to cause me to pay taxes, because according to them, according to the tax return I'm turning in, I made nothing.
Yeah, and I'm reinvesting back into my business as well.
Right.
So a lot of that, it definitely helps you not have to pay taxes or pay the IRS if you have all these extra expenses. But if the minute that you write it off, then it looks like, so you could make 200 grand, write off 170, and it looks like you make 30,000 in the eyes of the government. So when we go to look at your income, we're looking at 30,000 plus a little bit of expenses back,
which is a little bit different
versus someone that makes 200 W-2, and we can use the full 200 of salary.
Right. I want to say that's what's different is when you are a W-2 employee, we can look at your gross earnings, because the only thing that's being, taken out of that situation are your taxes and Social Security and all that kind of stuff. So we can look at your gross earnings. I think a lot of people who are self-employed think, why can't you just look at my gross earnings? And because we're like, this is on a different scale.
There are, and don't get me wrong, there are some programs that allow you to like do bank statement loans, but the terms are going to be, the interest rate's going to be much higher, and it's a much more complex situation than it would be just like a simple conventional. So when they're looking at it that way, there are programs that allow you to do that. The terms are just not going to be as good as a typical conventional mortgage.
So I am a W-2 employee,
Yeah.
but my husband is self-employed. So I am very familiar with filing self-employed taxes.
Yeah.
And I joined your team in 2019.
Yeah, man.
And since then, I have seen many a tax return through loan processing. And I kind of started to absorb what I was seeing. And honestly, I joined your team probably about the same time that my husband became self-employed. So those things were kind of happening in tandem. And so I started to absorb this balanced concept of, yes, I don't want to pay taxes at the end of the year and empty out my entire savings account. So there is a purpose.
Yeah, I mean, I'm still team don't pay the government more that they need to get.
Yeah.
So,
Well, there's a purpose and a point to writing off your expenses. But being in the mortgage industry, I was able to put two and two together very quickly that if I ever wanted to use my husband's income to qualify for a mortgage, writing off all of my expenses to either show zero income or negative income was going to hurt me in the long run.
it was.
More importantly, it was going to hurt me in that 2-year picture.
Yeah, 100%.
So even if
After you buy the house and you're not moving, then whatever you want to do.
So I started to think about that, and I started to think, what are my future plans in the next 2 to 3 years? Are we going to want to get a different home? Are we going to need to get a mortgage? Are we going to want to use his income to qualify for that mortgage? And I started to hit more so this sweet spot. And honestly, let's say he made X amount of money, I would decide in my head, I want to reflect on tax returns that he made Y amount of money. So I'm going to limit myself to writing off just that amount, even though I could write off more.
More, yeah.
And that's because I settled on, I want to show this much income on this year, this much income on this year. So that way, when an underwriter has to look at that 2-year picture, I essentially already know what income they're going to credit him with.
Yeah.
So
Well, that's why I think it's important that if you do become self-employed, reach out and get a mortgage application in and figure out what formula are they using. So that way you can back, I mean, a lot of the times I'll go, so here's what we do. And I'll even just show them the simple formula and tell them like, hey, when you file, you can plug these numbers in because it's literally just line 31 here, line 30 here, like line 6, and you just plug the numbers in and it'll tell you, it'll spit out what the income is going to be, especially on less complex business structures. So I'll tell them like, if you're going to be self-employed, because a lot of times people reach out after 1 year of filing taxes and I go, okay, you're good here, but just know that you're going to have to need 1 more year. And based off that 1 more year, this is how we determine what your debt to income ratio is. This is how we determine what your income is. And so I coach people to let them know how to qualify. That way they can make the appropriate decisions when it comes time to file the next year.
Right.
So that they're able to buy a house rather than, oh no, I've messed up. I wrote everything off and now I got to wait 2 more years because I showed a loss.
So let's talk about that oh no.
Yeah.
And there's something out there that I feel like I wasn't extremely aware of until I also got into the mortgage industry, which is the ability to amend your tax returns with the IRS.
Yes, you can amend your tax returns. If you find more expenses or less expenses, they do have the ability to refile. It's basically just like you're refiling, and then based off that refiling, if you owe more taxes, you could pay that to amend it. And that's just in case people make mistakes.
Right,
Yeah.
right, because the IRS wants accuracy.
Yeah.
And so essentially you are saying I've come into new information for better or worse, and I want to reflect that new information to the IRS so that way they have the accurate records of what I actually earned that
Correct.
particular tax year. I can choose to amend my tax returns and write off less to credit me with more income.
Yeah.
Now, the catch on that is that when the IRS sees that you've not had as many write-offs, you're going to then owe the taxes.
You're going to have to pay Uncle Sam.
Yes, on that income that they are adding back into your tax return.
Yeah.
Tax return. But a lot of people may say, well, sure, I'm willing to pay a little bit more on taxes if you're telling me that that's the make or break on being able to buy a home this year.
Yeah.
So that's just a tool to keep in mind for people who might feel like they're on the precipice, or maybe they can get pre-approved, but not
Absolutely.
what they wanted to be pre-approved for. So,
100%. That's why I think it's important to take that meeting to just see how they come up with the numbers.
Yes.
And once you see it, then you can make whatever plans or strategies, even for the next year or the current year, however you want to do it. So it's even better to do it. I mean, you have till April. So a lot of times it'll be January when I have these conversations most of the time with self-employed people and go, all right, come April, you need to show this much if you're going to qualify for this much, or you need to show this much if you're going to qualify for this much. So what, and then they can get their expenses together to see what they owe before they appropriately file.
Yes.
Legally appropriately file their taxes.
Yes. So, in summary, you can buy a home if you're self-employed, but it's going to take some extra planning steps.
Yeah, it's a
So,
little more complex than just your typical, here's how many hours I work a week at this rate.
yes, so be looking towards the future, be planning towards the future now if you are self-employed. And then when it
I
comes
mean, we've done
to,
self-employment borrowers that were stunt drivers for Disneyland. That was the
Yes.
coolest one, where he was sending us videos of him jumping his car.
he was
and,
so low key about it too. He
Oh,
was like
you-
just casually writing on the mortgage application, I do stunt driving for Universal Studios. And we're like, what?
Here's some of our videos. And he was the most laid-back person ever, too. Which I
Yeah.
guess you're in such high-stress situations, you got to be
Yeah.
laid back. But yeah,
Then the video production company.
we've done video production companies where they sent us, I think, a wild turkey commercial they did.
Yeah.
You
yeah,
get to
they-
meet really, that's why I love the whole entrepreneur, self-employment people, because they usually have like the coolest jobs.
Oh yeah, came across one time. She refurbished dolls and resold them.
Yeah.
Remember that one?
Yeah. I'm like, what? People make money in so many different ways now.
You know
It's
what?
awesome.
Find your passion, make money.
Get after it. Get after it. I love that.
Okay, let's dive into some nonsense.
Okay.
What is the best and worst reality TV
This is
out
your
there?
favorite subject. This is your favorite subject.
What is the best and worst reality TV out there? How does our fixation on reality TV reflect on society as a whole? And yes, I like this topic, but I want to clarify. I like to think that I like the better parts of reality television.
I'm sure you do. I'm sure you do. I went down the rabbit hole. I remember, when Jersey Shore was a thing, I watched a half a season of it before
Did
I
you?
was like, yeah. And then even now I watch like if you consider this reality TV shows, like the old man TV shows like Dual Survival or what are some of the other ones?
No, that's quality.
Alone.
That's not,
And like
yeah,
the game
that's
shows that are
quality.
kind of stuff, yeah.
Yeah.
I've passed my real world phase in some of those types of ones.
Yeah.
The ones that bug me the most, which I feel like are the most ones that are on fire, is like the love shows, because there's like 800 of them. They all essentially are pretty much the same, and they always never
on,
stick together.
hold
They
on.
never stick
Okay.
together. And they're like, but Derek is such a good guy. She should pick Derek. And then 2 years later, you're like, yeah, Derek was just trying to build his brand. They're not together anymore.
Okay, so I was thinking back to like my first exposure to reality TV, and that's kind of hard because the more I looked into this, the more I realized how many things fall under the umbrella of reality television. And I was like, oh man, so reality TV has been around forever, because you even have to think game shows
Yeah.
are reality TV. So you think back to
Is
like
Fox
Password
News and CNN reality TV?
That's another podcast episode. So I was thinking, I did not watch Real World. I did not watch like The Hills and stuff. I did watch, though, I don't know if this is on your radar, Newlyweds, which covered the first and only 3 years of the marriage of Nick Lachey and Jessica Simpson.
Was this pre or post Tony Romo?
Pre.
Pre Tony Romo?
When was Tony Romo?
I mean, way back in the day. 2000. I mean, it was before 2009, because I think Dak. No, I don't remember. It was a while ago.
I think she was with Tony Romo right after.
Okay.
I could be wrong. Anyways,
Aaron
I
Carter's brother,
remember-
right? Or am I
What?
thinking of someone else? Is that Aaron Carter's brother? No, that's Nick Carter.
No, yeah.
No, it is like Nick Lachey, isn't
No,
it?
Nick Lachey is from 98
8 Degrees?
Degrees.
Jeez.
Yep. Yep.
Childhood, baby.
Yeah.
There it is. What was their famous song? They had one-hit wonders, I think, right?
Did they, or were they trying to compete at the time with like NSYNC and Backstreet
There
Boys?
is no
And 98
comparing with
Degrees was
NSYNC.
like, right, exactly.
Second tier.
Exactly. The best thing that 98 Degrees produced was like Nick Lachey.
Yeah.
Okay, so that was my first exposure, and I was teenager, maybe preteen at the time, and I mean, it was only 3 seasons, and I did not track it carefully, but that was when I really absorbed, wow, I'm really enthralled with watching somebody else's like life.
Uh-huh.
And that reality television like subgenre would be called like lifestyle, like day in the life. There is no storyline here. We are not watching them
Like the
achieve
Duggars.
fame. We're not, yeah, the Duggars, Keeping Up with the Kardashians. That is just like lifestyle reality TV.
Mm-hmm.
And I have to say, because I have now seen other reality television, that is my least favorite lifestyle TV.
I remember my wife loves the Duggars, and we'd be watching, or she'd be getting me to watch, and I'd always joke with her because their cliffhangers would be like, you know, such and such Duggar's sister started dinner. Will it come out correct? Tune in after the break. And she's like, shut up. And I would laugh. Is she going to wear pants this episode?
The answer to that is no.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm with you.
I'm amazed that they went for so many seasons. I mean, I get that they're fun-loving people, and it's wild to have that many kids. I can't wrap my head around that to begin with, but the fact that they went that long.
I think, is it just like you wish that you could know them in real life? Not like the Duggars exclusively, but anybody. And so you're like, this is the closest I'll get?
You'd have to explain it to me.
I don't know.
Or we can get her on. We can get my wife on the podcast and she can explain it. Her and her friend.
So there's that, but then you even have to think about this too. True crime and like courtroom TV shows, also reality television.
Like Judge Judy.
Judge Judy, which
Maury.
my husband loves Judge Judy.
That's funny.
Not just her show, herself.
I don't get that. So they're real court cases that they decide they're going to let this woman that's a television star decide the case.
No, she's a real judge.
Well, I get that, but she's not a real. I mean, like, you're publicly out there for everybody to see.
She has a really impressive resume, actually. Okay. We're gonna have Jeffrey on.
I'm not trying to throw shade at. I'm not trying to throw shade.
Yeah. Calm down.
Yeah, no shade here.
But yeah, it's just taking all these little court cases, usually like domestic disagreements, and they're just llama drama, and letting a judge on television decide. Yeah. I mean, it's so much paternity stuff. So much. But I do see the appeal that the way that Judy handles it is really fair but firm.
Do you think
that's what's fun to see?
That you think that's that's at the heart of reality TV, is that it's the only time in our society where you can rightly be judgmental and criticize people without any blowback?
I think that could be a part. I don't think it's whole.
Because you're always like, all right, well, in the love shows especially, you're like, well, I'm rooting for him, and I think he's a jerk, or I think she's and you know, you're totally allowed to have those judgments without people being like, you're being judgmental or critical.
Yeah. Well, I also kind of think it is.
And you can look down on people and feel good while you're eating whatever you want. I mean, that's.
For me, it's like, I don't foresee a point in my life ever that I would be able to compete on a Food Network TV show.
Because you don't have the skills?
I will not beat Bobby Flay.
Who is Bobby Flay? Gordon Ramsay? I don't know Gordon Ramsay.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. I watch sitcoms.
That is sad. Okay, anyways. And so, but does the idea of just a average Joe coming on to a Food Network TV show to defeat a giant, well-renowned chef appeal to me? Yes. Will I ever get to do it personally? No. So do I watch other people do it because they are getting to live out things that I don't anticipate I would ever live out in my life?
I mean, like, I would love to be on those shows where you do, like, Survivor looks like it would be fun. Going on, like, what was the one that Rogan was the host of back in the day?
Oh, Fear Factor.
Yeah, I would love that, but minus the eating stuff. I was I'm all for jumping out of trains.
Eating stuff.
I know. I'd be
Joe's firm.
I know. I'm not eating bugs. That's when I'd be like, and for those reasons, Shark Tank would be reality TV too. That's a good one. That's one I watch all the time.
So I think it's funny that like some of us might say just casually like, ugh, reality TV, or like, oh my gosh, I love it. And if you're saying ugh, you probably actually do watch reality TV. We just don't know.
Is the NFL and the NBA reality TV? Is everything reality? I mean, we're starting to get.
I think if we didn't have the genre of sports and entertainment,
then you would consider
it would be. But it's just so far its own genre that it keeps that.
Okay.
Yeah. Now, like lifestyle reality TV that might follow a sports person, that would be
like
more
the Ball
so.
Brothers had their own reality TV show. I never watched it, but.
Well, and then Netflix had a couple of those specials too, following like community level colleges and their like sports teams and how people thrived in that, and then moved on to like college level, professional level sort of stuff. So
which one is your favorite right now?
A singular show or a subgenre?
Like,
don't limit me.
I'm talking about when you think reality TV show, you think the love shows. The dating love shows. I would think that's majority.
So I watch some of those. I try to be kind of selective about them because I can usually only handle it for so long. So ones that
Is it too cringe?
Yeah. It's too unrealistic. It's too not reality.
You need more reality
and
than reality TV.
Like, yeah. If we're going based off of the instinct to watch somebody else live out something that I won't ever live out, yeah. I don't want it to be pure fiction because then it's like I'm not really watching you live it out, I might as well go watch the new rom-com on Netflix,
Well, like the Love is Blind one, I watched one season with her.
That's a favorite of
my
mine.
wife. But my thing is this, what I feel like would make it more fun is if they weren't all good looking and they really had some people that were not in the 7, 8, 9, 10 range, and instead get some 3s and 4s in there, or 5s, and then have the match and truly see if Love is Blind.
I'm not gonna say that they have had people on there that have not been good looking, but I'm also gonna not say it.
Oh, look at you be politically correct. This is reality. You're supposed to tell exactly how you think you feel in that moment.
Let me just assess that show as a whole. One of the reasons I like it, because it's based off of this premise: is love really blind? The host is Nick Lachey.
That's funny. Full circle.
Yeah, full circle. It's just really stuck with that genre.
It is not.
Well, that's what's funny. So they're going based off of this theory, and the concept is that there's, maybe 20 girls, 20 guys that are limited on different sides of a building, and you can come together and go into these rooms together to go on a quote date, unquote, and you are blocked off by a full-on wall where you can't see the other person, but you can hear the other person.
Yeah.
And so you're having blind conversations with somebody to get to know them. But here's a couple of things I've learned about the show following the seasons is, one, there is no limitation to what you can talk about.
What are the most conversations
about? Some
about?
people do choose to talk about appearance or ethnicity.
So they say things like, if other people were judging your appearance on a scale from 1 to 10, what do you look like?
No, but sometimes it might just come out like organically. Like you can only have.
Do you have any modeling contracts?
No, like Luke, if you were in there, you could only have 2 conversations before it would come out. My dad works at a cheese factory.
Yes, that's true.
And then be like, okay, Luke, are you, let me take a guess, Mexican? You'd be like, yeah, half Mexican, like you love it. You're so proud about it.
Yeah.
Like, if you were trying to get to know somebody, you really couldn't hold that part of yourself back.
That's true.
And so sometimes it comes out just organically because there's not a way to prevent it. And then some people, I've seen them go in and have these conversations, and they might specifically say, hey, I'm Catherine. Just so you know, I want to intentionally not have any conversations that touch on physical appearance.
Oh.
Because they're trying to really get the...
I just think it's funny that they have 2 conversations and then they talk about how, I really love them. And you're like, love after 2 conversations? That's
they don't have 2 conversations. It's more than that. But
7?
Then when they get out of the pods, is what they call them, they're going on this pre-wedding honeymoon, which, shame. And then at the altar, they ultimately make the decision, is love blind? Do I want to go through with marrying you? So it's
They've seen each other at this point, though, right?
The reverse of Married at First Sight.
Okay.
But yes, they see each other the moment they say, in the pods, we agree, we're going to get engaged, and then they go out into a hallway and finally see each other for the first time. So there's this period
The Married at First Sight one, they have their...
terrifying.
Well, it's terrifying, but they have their questionnaire and they have all their values that they talk about.
It's baloney.
And they're like, we matched you with your perfect match. And it's like, come on. A lot of them are like complete opposites because they're trying to stoke the fires of arguments.
Exactly.
So I don't believe that whole we're trying to make you stay together.
Watch through 2 full seasons of Married at First Sight because it just stresses me out so much. I'm just so stressed.
I like when they put them together and they're like, yeah, we're not attracted to each other. And you're like, well, that's the end of that.
Well, Married at First Sight, too, I think starts to play a little bit more negatively towards the sanctity of marriage because they're teeing people up to get married on episodes like 1 and 2, and then we follow them through a season where they decide if they're going to pursue divorce or not. And so they're
have a follow-up
gearing
season?
them up.
See that?
What?
What do you? Oh yeah, for
Like
the
they
end,
get
the
married
final
in the
episode.
beginning.
Yeah.
Love is Blind, I think, is the reverse of that time frame.
that's the
and I
better one.
prefer it a little bit more because they're asking you to make that decision at the altar before you actually proceed with a marriage. I think it's just a little kinder to the sanctity of marriage.
Which one do you think, if you had to put them in order between those 2 and The Bachelor, where you're most likely to find your true love or least likely?
Bachelor is at the bottom. Love is Blind is at the top. Married at First Sight is second. Maybe Bachelor and Married at First Sight are tied for failure.
Because that's the main show, I feel like, that started it all. Or at least is the main one.
I think Love is Blind kind of just allows you to make your decision, having gotten to know the person, having gotten to see the person. Is love blind? No. But during that time, after they get engaged, is physical appearance a pretty consistent part of the conversation? Yes. Do many of the people choose not to get married to the person ultimately because although they fell, quote, in love with their personality in the pods, they saw them in person and went, I can't
do this
for the rest of my life? Yes. And although a lot of those people get a lot of shade, I'm like, it's kind of semi-fair to include that into your decision
Yeah.
rather than saying, surely I'll get attracted to you years into our marriage. Well, it's
I
iffy.
saw, if we're talking about the worst reality TV show I've ever heard of,
Yeah.
or the concept, apparently there is a show on the Discovery Channel in which you go to South America with a bunch of couples. You pick a spirit animal, and then you try to pick up the opposite sex by making animal noises, and you're not allowed to speak to them. So if I was thinking the dumbest concept I've ever heard, that when you're like making dolphin noises or ooga oogas at people, that
Okay,
is
that's
that
a
is taking it
caveman.
too
That's
far.
not even a
We are
spirit animal.
scraping the bottom of
Yeah.
what is.
They're not.
That is so. I died laughing. I was
Yeah,
like, this
I'm
is
not
so good.
easily drawn to the TV shows where I'm like, not only do you not have a chance of lasting, but the ones that are just more like, we're trying to pair you together
want
for a
something real.
dating relationship. I'm like, okay, yeah, that's like 5 times not going to end well. Yeah. My be all end all of reality television is competition television.
Survivor.
Survivor, The Amazing Race, The Challenge. I have learned though that I prefer shows with a larger physical component than shows that are just purely social. Like I tried a couple of seasons of Big Brother. I didn't love it because although there's meant to be games involved with that TV show, like it's just really unappealing games.
Would
I'm
you like
it's uninteresting?
So my favorite one is Alone. That's I don't know if you know the concept of
Yes.
it, but they stick you in like
I've seen a few seasons.
yeah, in Alaska, and then it's like it's cold over time, and you have to survive in the wild for
Yes.
100. I think it's like 100 days, and they drop you off with almost nothing.
No,
You have to
it's
film
an
yourself and-
indefinite amount of days. You just have to be the last man standing.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, and then it's funny though. It's the people that like. First of all, I feel like I'd like to think I'd last longer than I actually would.
Right.
About day 3 when it's cold, I'd be like, I'm out. I'm too. I mean, I like California weather. I could not do Alaska.
You would get too cold too fast, and then I feel like you would opt out because I actually feel like you might would be too risky.
Maybe it's funny though. The people that have all the extra weight, they're the ones that always make it to the end, and they have the least amount of survival skills. I remember I watched one. He showed up and lost
true.
107 pounds on like 10. It felt like a
I
month
watched
and a
the
half.
one season where
And he won. And he won it all. Or no, he got second to a different guy who was like meant and built to live in the wild. Like he won his $1 million, and you're like, what are you
Yeah.
gonna do? And he's like, I'm gonna finance a trip for me to go to Russia and chill in the wilderness for a year. And
Oh
you're
my
like,
gosh!
okay.
So you're gonna just repeat the show?
He killed a muskox with a knife. He ran up and like stabbed it and then ran off and then came back and stabbed it and then processed the meat and lived in like a rock house. And I was like, that is a Cro-Magnon Neanderthal of a man. I mean, oh my God. Bear Grylls
Big
has no
words.
shot. He's eating the back. He's like, oh, eating the backside of the eyeballs is where all the fat and blubber are. It's very important. And you're like,
So,
you're crazy.
Would you say that show appeals to you even more deeply because of the extreme level of realism? Because that is the show, correct me if I'm wrong, where no film crew goes with you.
No.
In fact, they spend several days training you before they release you on how to record film on the videos.
Yes.
Or the cameras that they then send you with.
Yeah, no, I just
love
think it's
that.
Yeah, I think it's. I think that's what makes it appealing is it's so hard. You see people like they are suffering out there unless they have mad skills. So you have to
Right.
prove yourself. But
Yeah.
I feel like it was the most interesting show.
Yeah. Survivor is probably my favorite because the outwit, outlast, outplay, it really is multiple layered components. So there is the physical component of competition and trying to be on teams that win. And I think Survivor just has good games. They're very
You have
interesting.
to be smart. You can't be too good because then they kick you out.
Right.
You can't be you can't suck
They
or else
call
they
that
kick you
being a
out.
sleeper.
What does that mean?
Like in sports, you're a sleeper. You're flying under the radar.
under the radar, yeah.
You don't want to draw too much attention by winning all the competitions. You don't want to draw too much attention by being the person that leads all of the ideas towards voting other people off.
You want to hang out in the
Yeah.
background.
Luke, I just have to tell you,
I would be
100% I would vote you off.
100% I'd be kicked off.
I would not be a sleeper for the sake of saying we got to get this guy off.
Yeah, I think if you're too conniving too, you get in there, they kick you out.
I'm going to say, though, there was one season that I watched. I can't remember her name. I want to say it was Sarah, but that could be wrong, where this one girl chose or did this just absentmindedly. She was the opposite of a sleeper. She went in any team that she was on the entire season, always won. She almost always had immunity. And every time she had immunity, she just like would lead the boat.
Yeah.
I do also think how you and I would survive in The Amazing Race.
I have never watched The Amazing Race.
I told you to do research for today, Lucas Johnson. So they are sent around the world and over the course of weeks and weeks and weeks, and they'll end up where they started, usually. So if they start in LA, they might get sent over to Europe and then China and then Russia. And on each leg of the journey, they're given several different obstacles and challenges that they have to do. Some of them are physical, like move all of these rice bags from this mat to this mat. And then some of them are more puzzle based, like figure out the rhythm of these, Portugal dancers and repeat it perfectly with no errors. And you don't get to move on
Until you do it.
until you get past all the obstacles. And then usually the last team to arrive to the next checkpoint gets eliminated until you're down to one winning team.
Oh, that sounds fun.
But there's big reality in this show in the sense that you are seeing like married couples like bite each other's heads off. You're seeing like father-son teams like arguing over different ways to solve things. You're seeing like best friends probably leaving, not ever talking to each other again. And I just think often about that show, I'm like, okay, would I want to go with Jeffrey, or do we just think too different? Would I want to go with my sister because we would think very similarly and have different strengths? Would I want to go with my father-in-law even because he thinks really different?
Wait, you get to pick who you go with?
Yeah, you sign up as a duo to go on the show. And then I'm like, oh man, I think Luke and I would be really successful because we're so different, but we also might not survive because we're too different.
Yeah. No, I could get that. I could see how that's appealing. I'd watch it.
Yeah.
Maybe I should watch an episode.
Yes.
That's what I'll promise.
Yes. No, you need to seek me out first and I'll tell you which seasons to watch.
Because there's some that are terrible and some that are good.
Absolutely. Yep.
That makes sense.
Okay, so society as a whole, I think that there is some understandability as to why people would be attracted to reality television. And I think judgment towards reality television has to be done a little bit carefully because the genre as a whole encompasses so much. Full-on TV channels are just reality TV. When you think about Food Network and like HGTV and stuff like that, just pure reality television. But there definitely is the subgenre of usually like the romance and lifestyle reality that is just taking an extreme decline. So I think there's worthwhile out there.
No, I don't judge people. I mean, they probably look at
You do a little.
Hey, to each his own. It's entertainment at the end of the day. So if you enjoy it, you enjoy it.
Yeah.
I enjoy the survival type of shows that are like that, and some people like that.
Yeah.
I just think that I will say this: they do spark conversation. They do.
Clearly.
They do keep interesting conversation. I've had many a conversation about reality TV show, especially talking with Karen. And so you have. It creates fun.
HGTV, in my opinion, has improved in the last decade because it's moving more towards reality, and especially
I don't like HGTV because it ends with a Target run. So I'm anti that.
Let me touch on that then, because I kind of agree with you that it, as a whole TV network, has led to a lot of unrealistic expectations. We agree on that.
My budget is $100,000. I'd like a $500,000 house. I feel I can hear the realtors that I talk to on a daily basis be like, HGTV has ruined the expectations of
But
reality.
I try a new show here and there, and I have found in the last, maybe just the last couple of years, to be honest with you, that the realism is coming through a little bit more strongly. Because I even watched, I think I told you about this, I watched one season solely centered around a HGTV flipper wanting to flip like a venue, like a wedding venue. She was taking an old historic home
and making it. That's cool. I've
and
never seen
by
that.
the end of the whole season, she was very clear about the fact that she had lost money on this. And to float
She talked about her failures?
And
it wasn't, I put all this in and then I sold it for $300,000 more?
And to even float the investment budget, she was literally open about having to sell off parts of her rental portfolio to afford this venue.
Yeah, that would be the one I would watch.
Oh, yeah. Well, then there was this, I watched this one last night, that was called Flip to $1 Million. And HGTV said, hey, you're a flipper couple from Chicago, here's $1,000. You're a flipper couple from New York, here's $1,000. We are moving you both to Dallas for 6 months. Take your $1,000 and figure out how to break into the, investment game in real estate in Dallas. You've got 6 months. Work your way up to the point where you have flipped a house and you are now selling it for $1 million. Go.
I like that. I mean, even The Apprentice.
So here's what's funny.
Our president came from reality TV
Both of
show.
those people failed.
They couldn't do it?
At week 26, I guess maybe that's what it is, they got a call from the HGTV host and they said, you've missed your deadline. You've not completed the challenge.
Well,
and then they had one additional episode because both couples said,
well, who wins?
Okay, I didn't complete the challenge. You're totally right, but I'm in the middle of a flip for $1 million. And why would I sell it as is and walk away from that? That's not wise from an investment standpoint. So we're going to follow through on this. So the camera crew stayed around and got an extra episode, and we got to see those houses get finished.
Finality.
But I was like, how cool. When I saw that host call them, I was like, oh my gosh, she's going to get on the phone and say, we've decided to extend and give you 4 additional weeks to finish your projects because you're doing such a great job. Nope.
You fail.
She said, you're done. Deadline's over. And in finality, we are not tax professionals, but we've seen a lot of tax returns.
That's true.
So that's our claim to fame. Thanks for tuning in today. If you want to weigh in on any of today's topics, find us on social media at Johnson Lending Team MN. That's team with 3 M's.
Or if you're ready to make a move, you can visit my website to fill out a mortgage application at www.movement.com/lucas.johnson.
If you've enjoyed or endured listening to us today, please leave us a review on whatever platform you use to stream.
For what it's worth, that was our 2 cents and nonsense.